Tomie Kawakami was once an ordinary high school girl. Well, as ordinary as a manipulative narcissist could be. It seemed to be that her selfish nature stemmed from her beauty, feeding into her ego and letting her manipulate the men in her life. However, her story wasn't that simple. She has an unusual effect on people which makes them fall obsessively in love with her despite her repulsive personality. People bewitched by her beauty fall so deep into their insanity that they get an irresistible urge to violently murder her. That isn't the end to her anomalous properties, however. Tomie also has a fast-acting regeneration factor that allows her to come back from even a single drop of blood. Her cells can also take control of a human being when they're exposed to a significant amount. Tomie can also multiply at will when exposed to extreme psychological trauma. Photos are able to capture her insidious aura. She stops aging when she multiplies for the first time, and all Tomies innately want to kill each other when they become aware of the other's existence. Throughout the years, after the initial revelation of her supernatural regeneration, many of her attributes were discovered by various individuals. However, Tomie was never properly examined by a specialized research facility. The SCP Foundation is a cross-continental organization whose goal is to secure, contain, and protect entities, supernatural individuals, and anomalous objects. These can range from a tiny spider that can telepathically communicate with individuals, to an alien deer god that has the ability to freely manipulate matter to its whim. The SCP Foundation has been able to contain a wide variety of dangerous beings, so a bratty humanoid enchantress with super regeneration isn't far out of the Foundation's reach. But how would they contain her? To start, we'd have to first determine which of the three classifications Tomie would fall under. There's safe, which means the entity is easy to secure and contain, but that doesn't necessarily mean the entity isn't dangerous, just that it's easy to control. There's Euclid, which means there are some elements of unpredictability that isn't really understood, but can still be contained. And Keter, which means the entity is highly dangerous and uncontrollable, so it always has to be accounted for. Tomie would either be a Euclid or a Keter. There's too many ways she can breach containment, and the effect she has on people is very strong. It is possible to fend off her effect, but it's very unlikely. I'm leaning more towards Euclid, mostly because Tomie herself isn't malevolent, and while the damage she could potentially do is great, it's over a long period of time, and securing a Tomie isn't a hard process. Containing her would also be relatively easy, since it has been shown that submerging her in really strong acid is able to virtually stop her cells from regenerating. Killing Tomies also isn't a problem, since fire has been shown to permanently destroy them, so there are a lot of countermeasures that can be employed. It still would be difficult to contain her, because even if she was dropped in a giant tank of hydrofluoric acid by women, there's still a chance that Tomie would be able to seduce them. Women are overall less likely to be affected by Tomie, but it has happened, and it wouldn't matter even if they never saw her and used robots to transfer her somewhere, since just smelling her would be enough for her to start having an influence over someone. Although, like I said, the chances of that happening are extremely low. I don't think she would make it to Keter class, even though there is a Keter class SCP that shares a lot of the same attributes as her, since she's not as inherently aggressive or invulnerable. Speaking of SCPs that are similar, there are quite a few that I think would be interesting to cross-test. There is SCP-610, which is a type of amorphous flesh that rapidly infects and takes control of anything it comes into contact with. It also is susceptible to fire. I imagine cross-testing between Tomie and SCP-610 would most likely result in some sort of hybrid between the two entities, which would be horrifying. There's SCP-096, which is a humanoid SCP that can't be looked at, except instead of you wanting to rip it apart, it'll rip you apart. Interaction between it and Tomie would be interesting, since I don't know if it'll become attracted to her, and what would happen if it does. Not like it matters anyway, because even if it tried to kill Tomie, it wouldn't be able to. There's also SCP-871, which is a cake that multiplies every 24 hours. There's 237 of them. You think if there was an outbreak of infinite cakes, we could use an infinite amount of Tomies to consume the issue? There are other SCPs that I want to cross-test Tomie with, like SCP-682, a giant lizard that also has a high regeneration factor, but can control its healing so that it can adapt to whatever obstacle it faces. I don't think Tomie's influence will do anything to the lizard, because she never once has affected an animal, but even if it did, SCP-682 wants to kill everything anyway, so it would just result in Tomie's death, probably by finding a way to shoot fire from its mouth. There is SCP-999, an orange blob that can heal people and has a passive effect to make everyone happy. This one I'm really curious about because it will most likely make Tomie genuinely happy, since Tomie isn't shown to be immune to these kinds of influences, or it'll make SCP-999 go into a murderous rage, both of which I'd like to see. Lastly, I want to hypothesize a scenario between Tomie and SCP-053. SCP-053 is a little girl that, when interacted with in any way, or even simply just being around for a prolonged period of time, will drive any person into a homicidal fury and they'll try to kill her. If they do any damage to her, however, they will immediately have a heart attack or a seizure that kills them instantly. Sound familiar? This is the main reason why I think Tomie would be classified as Euclid, as her containment procedure would most likely be similar to SCP-053. If they were to ever interact, Tomie wouldn't affect the little girl since she is female and only 3 years old. Tomie would go into a psychopathic rage and try to kill the girl, but would suffer a heart attack or a seizure as a result. This wouldn't kill her, however, and she would just heal herself and try to kill the girl again. I could see a scenario where Tomie then starts multiplying because of the psychological trauma of having a heart attack over and over again, and all the Tomies trying to kill the little girl, which they eventually would succeed either by sheer number or her body parts crowding the girl and suffocating her to death. I've only scratched the surface of possibilities, and really any of Junji Ito's creations could fit into the SCP universe. I think it's an intriguing topic that's fun to explore, and I'd love to hear more ideas from you guys in the comments below. Thanks for watching.